I want to say thank you for everyone joining today. I know it has been very long. You're probably a little burnt out. So we're going to go ahead and try to expedite this as soon as possible and get you on the road to dinner here. Now, before we get going, my friend Nergui and I are going to take you through this topic today. I want to actually break the rule here and actually read the slide for you directly. So what we're going to say today is powering the AI boom, navigating the risks and rewards of SMRs and virtual power plants with PLEXOS. Now, you'll probably notice I've managed to incorporate 3 buzzwords into this opening sentence here. We've got AI, SMRs, and virtual power plants. This wasn't easy to do. That was actually intentional. The reason being, and I can kind of give you the story for why we went about this topic, was I talked to a friend a while ago, and we were talking about data centers. He was very much into virtual power plants. I love him, but he's not necessarily always into the guts of what you'd say something like PLEXOS, where he has to bridge reality with it. And I started asking him some questions. Well, how are you going to address these problems with virtual power plants and everything else? He said, Andrew, we're just going to virtualize it. And I looked at him and said, what do you mean by virtualize? And I stopped there at this point, but I was thinking, PLEXOS doesn't care about buzzwords. I mean, I use every word at it. I've used every word in creation at it, and it doesn't bend or do anything I want with it. PLEXOS cares about things reserve margins, generator ramp rates, heat rates, physics at the end of the day. So the point of this presentation is to guide us through and give us some examples of where these technologies may be useful and where they have some pitfalls associated with it. We can't go into things like, in detail, the entire technical review of SMRs. I'm the son of a nuclear physicist, and we could have nothing but talk about that for 2 or 3 years. Instead, we're going to try to focus this on specifically with PLEXOS. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and take it over to my friend, turn over to my friend Nergui, who's going to give us a quick introduction and maybe take us through the model setup and how we went through this.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nergui Rinting. I work with Ulteig, specializing energy market modeling and integrated resource planning. This is my 2nd time speaking at the conference. I'm so happy to be here again and excited to share what we have been learning. So, to give everyone a clear roadmap for today's presentation, here is the agenda we will be covering. So we will start by introducing Ulteig, who we are, and areas of expertise. And next, we will review our approach to statewide capacity expansion analysis. Then we will discuss the AI-driven load growth and explore the potential solutions to meet new demands. Then we will look at the case study focused on SMR and their role in future planning. Also, we will examine how virtual power plants can address evolving challenges. Finally, we will wrap up with the key takeaways. Before we dive into the analysis, I want to briefly introduce Ulteig. Ulteig is employee-owned engineering consulting firm with a deep experience across power, renewables, transportation, and water. In the power space, we work closely with utilities on integrated resource planning, transmission planning, market analysis, and regulatory support. A core part of our work is advanced power system modeling, especially using tools like PLEXOS to evaluate and help utilities to evaluate long-term uncertainties, policy-driven risks, and etc. This analysis is an example of how we are using statewide capacity expansion model to address one of the most pressing challenges we are facing today, AI-driven load growth, and what resources can realistically meet that demand. So let me start with the why. AI boom is driving unprecedented load growth due to load growth, and it's requiring us to rethink how we plan both new resources and transmission to deliver them. What Ulteig brings here is a statewide lens. Instead of looking at individual utilities plan in isolation, we unify each utility's plan in one combined view, so the result is resilient not just optimized by one assumption set. From there, we ran capacity expansion modeling, which can answer 3 practical questions. What should we build? When should we build it? And what does it make the most sense across the wide range of futures? And because the uncertainty is reality right now, we test many scenarios and sensitivities. And also, key advantage of the capacity expansion modeling is that we can evaluate emerging technologies like small modular reactors and virtual power plants. So Ulteig's Indiana-based case model was used to evaluate emerging technologies such as small modular reactors and virtual power plants. It is because Indiana is seeing substantial load growth due to data center development, which makes it suited for this analysis. Now, let's shift focus onto AI-driven load growth and explore the solutions we have been investigating. So AI is driving a step change in global electricity demand, with data center is expected to increase sharply, potentially doubling or more over the next decade. So to keep pace, companies are accelerating major infrastructure investment from the nuclear and gas generation to strengthening the grid interconnections to avoid future power constraint and ensure the reliability. That brings us to emerging technologies we tested. Small modular reactors for clean, firm capacity, and virtual power plants for flexible capacity from aggregated distributed energy resources. At this point, I would like to invite Andrew, and he's gonna take us our case study.
Thank you so much, Nirgui. Excellent job, by the way. Okay, friends, for those of you who are in the IRP space, we're gonna go ahead and start here with the SMR case before moving to the virtual power plants. I'm certain you've been asked by your stakeholders, we need to model SMRs. And have any of you gone recently and looked for the CapEx range in terms of what SMRs right now? I'm getting between $10,000 to $30,000 a kilowatt, depending on who you're talking to. And I don't really need to run PLEXOS at that point to tell you the model is probably not going to pick that. I think that's been pretty consistent across the board. We're seeing that for most of the state IRPs. And the comment isn't that that's not a slam against the technology, but it's similar to what we saw with batteries and renewables and everything else when they first got going, is what is the price going to decrease to the point when these become applicable? When are they going to be more readily selected beyond demos and pilots, which is what's largely going on now. To that end, when we built our study case here in PLEXOS, we didn't want to just start at $20,000. Instead, what we did was we went to more of a realistic estimate, maybe something like 10K, and we just started bringing it down until we eventually saw the SMRs potentially flipping and displacing the gas turbines. Now, you're going to notice here at the bottom here, I have $1,500 per kilowatt for natural gas, for new gas, natural gas per kilowatt for a combined cycle natural gas turbine. That is low in terms of market prices for right now, but we're looking over a longer time horizon. Depending on who you're talking to, there is a feeling that demand will eventually levelize for gas turbines. So again, this is more of a shot in the dark, and it just goes to show you just how many numbers are variable in this thing. We have FOM. There's a huge amount of uncertainty in FOM numbers for small modular nuclear reactors right now. Gas prices. We primarily used EIA as our data stream for this, but we all know that EIA is often wrong, as is any forecast. So we could prepare things like black swan scenarios potentially for gas prices as well, make SMRs look really favorable, but that's also probably not realistic on an extended duration given the plentiful supply of natural gas. So because of that, we started with basically our base case model, which again, we thank our friends at Energy Exemplar for providing the shell for this, which was the PLEXOS EIC zonal data set. We modified it heavily, but again, it's always great to have a starting point like that And I really just appreciate the work Energy Exemplar has done over the last 3 years to get that EIC data set really up to snuff now. It's behaving pretty well these days. So with that said, I think we can skip forward here, and we're just going to show you the breakpoints for the SMRs on the next slide here. So this was for our Indiana model, the entire state. Again, we want to give you that statewide look, not an individual utility. And at $2,000 a kilowatt for SMRs, it is still building combined cycle preferably. Now, at $1,900, the model flips. And at this point, it starts constructing the SMRs. This is not a firm number. Please don't take it to a regulatory agency and say, this is what we need to get the number to. There's huge amounts of uncertainties in these numbers. But it gives us an idea when our stakeholders and everyone else is telling us to model these things and it's 20 decay, and they come back and they're disappointed. Well, why didn't the model select it? Well, I can tell you it's because of this right here. We have to come down by an order of magnitude 10 potentially. This is not, again, a slam on SMRs in any way, manner, shape, or form. I actually very much am enthusiastic about the technology. But just like renewables and storage, it is eventually going to have to live and die on its own 2 feet and get down to a price level where it's competitive. We may not select them purely for economics. There may be other things going on that could be happening there too. Environmental restriction, firm generation, on-site generation, or just hedging against natural gas prices. But in a pure economic world, this kind of gives us a picture of what we're up against here. You know, I'd love to stop here for questions too, because we're going to go on to virtual power plants next. I know this is a little bit out of order. Does anyone have a pressing question you just want to shout out at this point? If not, if you can hold it to the end, that's great too. But before we go into virtual power plants, is there anyone out there? Yes, sir.
Why is it bidding at, why it bids at 1900 when the gas is still cheaper at 15? What's the additional output that makes it convenient here?
Well, you have uranium, which is quite a bit cheaper, as you rightly pointed out. There's FOM. We actually had a much higher FOM stream in the model originally, which pushed up the selection point higher than this, actually. So in that point, this is where kind of the magic of PLEXOS comes into play. It's the FOM, which I found was actually more important than the fuel. The price of uranium versus natural gas, we used uranium in this case, and then the CapEx itself. It was those combined aggregate factors that flipped at that point. And that's why it's very important to note this is a snap in time. Those other parameters are tweaking it, put a different stream of natural gas would change this breakpoint. This is to be illustrative of the order of magnitude you need to get it to before the model might start readily selecting. Okay. Thank you, sir. Define changes, sir. Please help me understand. I have the battery case coming up. This is just SMRs and gas. You're right. If we contaminate it with renewables, not to say that's anything wrong with renewables, but it would make it a much more complicated discussion. We can think for this of like-to-like base load, as you might say. Oh, by the way, just in case you were curious, I assumed a heat rate of about 8 here, by the way. I know some people say about 10 for SMRs because it's more of like a combustion turbine. A lot of SMRs right now are talking about combined heat and power applications, which are speculating to get it to below that 8 or below level as well. So that was our heat rate we used for this. I think we can jump forward into the virtual power plants. You got it?
Yep. Sorry.
All right. So our virtual power plant case, and this is the SMR one was fun. It was more straightforward. We had a lot of fun with the virtual power plant case one here. And again, the whole motivation for this was just me being annoyed with people throwing buzzwords at me. It's not to downplay virtual power plants, but one of the things that oftentimes gets missed when we talk about these things, solar batteries and these combined units that we call a virtual power plant, is they come back and say, just charge in off-peak hours. Well, this is a data center. Do you understand what that means? There is no off-peak, which means you have to overbuild to be able to charge the batteries to carry you through the evening. And this is where when you start eroding that base load or you don't have enough of it, you've got a problem. Now, I want to give you an important discrepancy here of our Indiana state model. Indiana's got a lot of base load. And for our statewide planning model, we updated a lot of the coal to be repowered on natural gas per recent IRPs. So there's still a lot of base load floating around in Indiana. Not enough of it to completely power all the data centers, but more so than you might get in other states where there's not as much firm generation floating around. So we ran a couple of cases here. One case was a base case with the model could build anything. And by anything, I mean simple cycle gas turbine, combined cycle, storage, and solar as well. We assumed 2-hour Tesla megapacks, by the way, for virtual power plants as well, which would change the results if we use something like long duration economic. But for right now, we're assuming virtual, which means smaller scale. There was the build anything case for the base case, and also the only virtual power plant case, solar, and in this case, the batteries as well. We didn't touch wind. We've done that previously in previous research we've looked at. So in this case, we chose to focus on the solar and storage. Then we did it for the high economic growth case with high data center growth case. And this is where things get a little bit crazy because there's not enough base load to accommodate this situation anymore. We've removed a lot of the flexibility. There are 2 ways you get pinched on base load. One is to retire it, and then you don't have enough firm generation floating around. And the other one is when you go crazy on load growth, which is what we're seeing right now with data centers, especially given the shapes of the data centers we put in here where we didn't allow them to be on an interruptible rate. And I think we can go ahead and skip forward, Nergui. So in terms of order of magnitude, we can see for our gas turbines, for a base case, maybe 3, 4 gigawatts, and then it starts building some storage in the later years with a little bit of solar as the price comes down. We assumed a degrading price curve for storage in this case, which made it a little bit more favorable in the later years. Again, it front weights it. Part of this reasoning here is too is it can dial back the coal generation, especially if it's got a cheap gas price. And again, it's going with that gas, front-loaded gas turbines. Now, when we get to only the virtual power plants, it's got to start building storage early on pretty quickly. We assumed an increasing profile for the ramp up of the data center, so it just didn't hit overnight. And you can see the solar, the batteries, and everything else starting to track at this point as it has to come on. And I want you to keep in mind here, 6 to 8 to 2 gigawatts of solar per year is an awful lot of solar in a given state. Perhaps doable, though. Okay, so maybe this is within the reason this is pretty expensive. Let's go into perhaps a more enthusiastic case with data centers right now. Jump forward. Okay, and please keep in mind, I want to avoid how to lie with statistics here. You can see the scale of these axes going up here. This is an awful lot of solar coming online. 20, 15,000, 20,000 megawatts per year. And this goes back to the misery, it's the data centers that are driving this, by the way, of trying to match generation to load when dealing with uninterruptible data centers. Now, you could come back and say, what if we interrupt the data centers? And that would dramatically change this picture as well. But however, then we have the flip side, you have to worry about transients and other things that can go onto this, where we get into those more operational reliability requirements too. In our blended world, the model is much happier. It starts building batteries. It has to get some up there even faster than it can get the gas turbines. We didn't allow the gas turbines to come into 2030, by the way, because of supply chain constraints. So it starts building with the batteries because it doesn't have much of a choice, and then it does more of a blended world across the horizon, a more economic world. This, again, is not to talk down to virtual power plants. I'm very much enthusiastic about the technology, but every technology has their place. And again, this just goes back to some of those spirited discussions I've had with some of my more pure renewable advocacy friends, that we may need a blend of technologies come in here, a shotgun approach, as it were. So let's go ahead and jump forward to our conclusion here. So just as I was kind of alluding to just a second ago, both of these are exciting opportunities that can help with emerging AI data centers, load growth, and everything else. But it's the aggregate picture we need to look at, the whole picture, not just focusing on one technology. As Nergui pointed out, SMRs can provide firm carbon-free capacity, but their competitiveness is highly sensitive to capital costs and the natural gas price forecast used in your model. VPPs, fast, flexible, but very difficult supplying uninterruptible base load, right? That's part of the problem we get into. Pet peeve of mine is when I hear base load as an antiquated concept. It's not. It still exists. We're seeing it in these model results here. Blended portfolios that can combine firm generation of natural gas or SMRs with VPPs and renewables may deliver the most practical, reliable, and cost-effective outcomes, which I think, as many of us know in the IRP space, that's mostly what we're seeing in our IRPs already. And let's go ahead and go forward. I think just have a couple wrap-up points, and we'll get to conclusions here. As always, Energy Exemplar, thank you so much for the model, as well as the EIC data sets. You guys have just been really knocking it out of the park with how your standard nodal and zonal data sets have been being built over the year. Our primary publication will be appearing in the Association of Energy Engineers. These are 2 peer-reviewed papers we're putting out, which contain a lot more detail than what we have here. We have 2 conference proceedings papers that you all should have access to, more high level, but available to you as well. And also we did collaborate with Purdue University Energy and Efficiency Center as well. Future research Ulteig is working on right now is, oh yeah, that's right. I do have to touch on the carbon point. I'm so sorry about that. Future research Ulteig is working on now includes, we're actually involved in research related to quantum computing right now and how this could be used to perhaps develop super PLEXOS someday. We're under NDA right now. We can't talk about that too much, but that is something we'll be preparing in the next year here that we'll be publishing to put out as well. So additional research, and it's in the papers as well, and we have it in the appendices in this presentation. We also did carbon price sensitivity, if you'd like to see some breakpoints on that, about how carbon impacts all this, and it certainly does. And again, our peer-reviewed papers will have a lot more detail in them as well of how the statewide model was built and how we can build these to provide, I would say, a complementary look to what we often see in individual utility IRPs. According to the timer, I've got a whole 9 minutes here. We want to get you guys to dinner sooner rather than later, but are there any questions we can answer? You're saying the megawatt nameplate of the solar? That's a wonderful question. Oh boy, yeah. As I say, I'm always very careful on that topic whenever I'm among friends here, so I'll talk about that. But yeah, land is one of those key things along with affordability that people get into. In terms of a lot of the calculations you see, like, which I think from, again, some of my more friends on the renewable advocacy side, they'll say, oh, well, just this much swath in Arizona desert powers the entire United States. But that's not really how it works, right? Because we know that there's, to your point, land, permitting, easements, site control. This is a zonal model, doesn't care about that. If I was running nodal, I would get into those points. And actually, that's even a step beyond me. We have a design team at Ulteig that deals with that. I did not do the land calculation. I do have the team inside of Ulteig that could probably get me if that's feasible or not. And I'm pretty certain they would probably tell me there are some pretty severe problems in the virtual power plant case only. But that's an excellent question in terms of what is actually achievable in land and what we can install. Absolutely excellent, sir. Yes, it was. We used an Indiana profile for everything. We would get a very different result if we were down in the deserts of Arizona. Very fair point as well. Yes, sir. Oh, we're supposed to use microphones. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, so I guess one thing I did notice about the like the side-by-side comparison of the combined cycle versus the solar and battery-only case was that for combined cycle we saw sort of this moderately sized one-time build-out of combined cycle sort of towards the beginning of the, I assume, where this higher demand really starts to become a problem, whereas when it was solar and battery only, we saw also, I mean, like a much larger nameplate capacity of solar being built, but it was being built nearly every year for like a 5 to 10 year or even more than that period. Is there any reason for that discrepancy in the timing of those build-outs where we wouldn't see like smaller build-outs of CC across a larger period or one large build-out of solar initially at the beginning of this higher demand?
Excellent point. Yeah, so there's a couple things going on there. One is we have a decreasing price curve in the model for renewables. So that's one aspect that plays into it. It's a very good point. The other one is that one thing I noticed, even for some of the environmental scenarios we ran, you would think for like a carbon price, it would actually tend to build a lot of renewables. We put a more controlled one. It actually built a lot of front-weighted natural gas. Indiana's still coal-heavy, and that's that interplay there. And that's where the nonlinearities of PLEXOS come into play. We did iterate and take it apart piece by piece, but there is that coupled effect that can make determining that exact build-out and staggering hard to do. But with that said, I will say the solar tended to track with the load growth. You could see that in the model when we plotted the generation. It didn't want to build the solar up front due to the capital cost. It tended to track with it. Where the gas turbines, I think it did a lot of that early on just to try to dial down the coal dispatch if it had to build it anyway. Does that make any sense, sir? This did change from our statewide model last year, where it didn't build much natural gas because we didn't have as much data center growth in it as well, in which case the solar tended to track more, just as you rightly pointed out, sir. Yeah. Absolutely excellent point. They are in there and up to date per the recent bill this last summer. The ITC for batteries continues because those they were never phased out. For solar, it does disappear. Now, one thing to point out here in terms of why you're seeing that as well. No, I know exactly what you're talking about here. The model didn't really need it early on, though, because Indiana was long on generation. So in this case, it didn't really have any reason to just go in there and start building in the early years to take advantage of that, because, as I say, it had a lot of natural gas, it had a lot of renewable, and the data centers, which drove this, didn't hit early on when the ITCs and PTCs were still in play for the solar and wind. So again, it tended to track with the wind. We didn't find that 1 to 2 years was enough to tip it in this case. Excellent question, though. Got a microphone, I guess they're sending it over to you, sir.
Sorry, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, I don't know if you mentioned this, did you explicitly model a planning reserve margin, or were your builds just to meet like the energy load growth?
Planning reserve margin is included, so all ISO requirements for Indiana would be, it was basically zone 6 we split off. It would have included all of the requirements for planning reserve margin and everything else. We included firm generation accreditation per MISO rules. Indiana is actually a little bit tricky because it's actually split between PJM and MISO. We defaulted to MISO, though, for most of the rules, just because we need to do an aggregate zonal model. So yes, all of that would have been included.
And did you look at the declining ELCCs with the renewable and storage penetration?
I understand what you're asking as well. You're basically saying that we run our LOLE model and we know we've got an ELCC model that decreases. No, we did not. It's a very interesting point to do in terms of an ELCC forecast, and it potentially could have resulted in more solar being built as well. With that said, we have run cases for what you're talking about before, and we found the energy matching the generation load was such a problem that it was just so long on capacity in many instances on storage and everything else. This goes into that broader picture, though, too, of does our traditional model of LOLE and ELCC work when you talk about that level of renewable and storage penetration, or do you need a whole new construct? I would lead towards the latter. And as interesting as that is, I think it would require a whole separate discussion of research. We could talk about that all day. I know exactly where you're going with it. I will have to punt, though. But let's talk and see if we can collaborate on a point, maybe a study in that in the future, because it's a very interesting point.
Making sure there's nobody else in front of me. I don't want to cause more chaos in the queue. Okay. You mentioned the battery ITC and the near-term remaining solar PTCs. To what extent were the nuclear PTCs considered in your modeling?
I am pretty certain when we ran the cases for that, we included the nuclear PTC as it was in the bill. I think we were up to date for this. I know in the 2 papers we published, we were doing this beforehand, but I believe that's included the nuclear PTC as well, sir. Great question, because that is included, and we would have had the phase-out date if that was specified. My colleague Luann has all of that. She's the master of rates and tariffs, and I'm sorry, sir, I won't embarrass myself anymore for speaking for her, but she went through that with a fine-tooth comb to try to make sure it was up to date with all the bills and everything else. Absolutely excellent point.
In your analysis, what made the VPPs a VPP as opposed to just solar and storage? Like, how were they set up differently?
That's a great point. So normally VPPs are an aggregate system designed to island a load. We assumed they were, or partially island, or however the objective is. We actually were more generous than that. We just allowed them to build uncoupled and said it was a quote-unquote VP. If I was more, we did do a coupling situation, and the model did not have fun at that point. It started to build way, way, way too much. So we allowed it a free build out, if that makes any sense, just to give you something that looks slightly pretty on the picture. We removed the coupling factor as we tried to do originally for the VPP because it was getting a little bit wonky on the optimization.
Hi, I have a question. Can you please go back to the slide showing the difference between the build-outs in CTs and SMRs?
Sure.
I think it was in the first few slides.
If we can. I believe it's going.
This one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a question. So here, when like when the capital price for SMR was like say like $2,000 per kilowatt, it was not building any SMRs. What was the build driven by primarily? Was it like an energy need or a capacity need?
Oh, in terms of what it built at this point, well, the data centers started to ramp up, I think, in 2029 or 2028. And at that point is when it triggers the build, largely, as I say, for, I think it was a combination of matched generation load as well as capacity obligation.
Okay,
The model would have checked both.
I have a follow-up question then. And you did say that like you included the PTCs for SMRs. So,
As I recall, I know it was in our primary paper we put to the Association of Energy Engineers. I believe we did have them in here for this one as well.
Okay, so my follow-up question is then like why in the case, even if the capital cost is like, say the same, why is it not building SMRs? Because like it can take advantage of the PTCs.
One more time, sir. I'm so sorry. I don't quite get it.
So my question is like, even if they say the capital price is the same for SMRs and the CT?
They're not the same. The capital price of CTs was $1,500 per kilowatt.
And for the second case, so it builds more SMR when you like reduce the capital price to 1,900?
Yes, the SMR capital price decreases from $2,000 to $1,900. The gas price stays at $1,500 per kilowatt.
Okay.
We're decreasing the SMR price. I apologize if I wasn't clear on that.
Okay, so in that case, like even when the price is still $2,000 per kilowatt, I'm wondering why the model does not pick SMRs because of the PTCs it can get when it generates.
Well, it would have included in there. If we hadn't included the SMRs, it would have been a higher breakpoint at that point for that to come into play. So it would the PTCs, as you rightly point out, it's no different than if we did something with adjust the price of natural gas. If we lowered the price of natural gas, it would lower the breakpoint as well. So it's just, and that goes to the snap in time and why this is difficult. It's actually a multi-dimensional optimization problem with all these variables that can change. So you're exactly right on, sir. This was just this specific snap in time with these set parameters at $1,500 with this natural gas stream, which was our case.
And I think, sorry, I have one more question.
Sure.
We use like NREL ATB to like see like for the costs for SMRs, and they come online, I think like what, 2035? I think they have a lead time of 10 years. So did you include that? Because like I see like builds like starting 2030.
No, we're in the land of dreams right now where I'm saying it could come out in 2030. It's a great question, but it was an illustrative study because we knew that's when the data centers built. You are exactly right. I don't think we're going to see the mass deployment of SMRs. You never know though. But your timelines are exactly with what we are seeing in the literature as well. So I wouldn't, thank you so much for that clarification. We're not saying SMRs are going to be available in mass in 2030. No, thank you. Wonderful questions. Appreciate the follow-ups as well. That was great. I wasn't very clear in my original presentation. So thank you, sir. My friends, I'm 3 minutes over, and you're not throwing tomatoes at us to get us off stage yet. But I tell you what, we're going to go ahead and get going. Nurgui is here. My partner Camilo is here as well. Find us and talk to us. And we love to talk to you about our research. We'd love to talk about what we're doing. And we're available for follow-up. We'll be seeing you tonight at the rodeo, and let's get you guys to dinner. Thank you so much, everyone.